And I quickly realized that in the Hong Kong market, even though Hong Kong is considered the capital of the toy market, because a lot of import export from China go through Hong Kong,
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of plastic toys. You go to the toy store or the toy street, surrounded by plastic. Or if not, there are only a few things, a few European brands at that time that was like super expensive, pieces of woods and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, at the same time, I saw that my daughter was very interested in felt, which is a material that is very easy to make a lot of things with.
Yeah.
And so my idea was to start making things with felt for her, and then eventually it became this concept of quiet book.
Hey, Islanders, and welcome to episode 194 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with the chief play creator and founder of Little Beans Toy Chest, as well as the founder and director of the Whidbey Island Language, Art, and STEM Center. Please welcome Hai Anh Vu. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview local business owners, comedians, singers, and more. I dive into their backstory to find out how they got where they are, what are some of the tips for you to do the same, and find out where they are going. Tune in every week as I interview more of the people you see every day. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday, except for the last 2 Tuesdays because I was in Germany and gone. Hope you guys are having a good week. And as I mentioned, I got to go to Oktoberfest in this last week, so that was a lot of fun. I got to go with one of my friends, one of my childhood friends named Wesley, which was funny. We were on the trip, and as we were meeting new people, they're like, "Oh, cool! So you guys have been friends?" And then we were like, "Yeah, we've known each other for almost 30 years." And I was like, "That's a really long time." So shout out to Wes. That was fun to go on that trip. Get to meet a bunch of people from all over the world. At Oktoberfest, when I was looking at things beforehand, said it brings in 6 million people over the course of the time period of Oktoberfest, which, funny enough, is not mostly in October. It's mostly in September. So that was weird, but I now know that. Great time. My hands and wrists are all sore from holding up steins because they're actually really heavy. So the waiters and waitresses that run around with like 6 or 7 steins to throw them to tables is just insane. Had a great time. Glad to be back in the saddle. So hopefully you guys have done some traveling, get to have some sort of time off. But let's jump into this episode. So I got to speak with Hai Anh Vu, who, as I've mentioned before, owns the company Little Beans Toy Chest, and we'll get into that and what that company is. And then also we get into the Whidbey Island Language, Art, and STEM Center, which is another company that she started recently. And so we'll get into that and why she started that and why it's important for her. I got to meet Hai Anh through the project I did earlier this year. I think I've had a lot of podcasts lately about the projects I had earlier this year with the RAIN Catalyst Group, as well as the EDC, which is the Economic Development Council of Island County. So I got to meet a whole lot of new people, lots of new business owners, people that are doing really cool things in Island County. So I got to meet a lot of our brothers and sisters from across the water there over on Whidbey Island, which is fun because I don't typically make it over that far. But Hai Anh was great. She was one of the mentors within the program, so we worked very closely with her. And it was fun to get to talk to her on the podcast. I do apologize ahead of time. We had some weird internet outage things throughout our phone call, so there's a few stops and starts that you're going to notice. I try and jump in and let you know when those happen so that we can keep the conversation going. But without further ado, here's my conversation with Hai Anh Vu. Hey, Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with a children's author and then the founder of Little Beans Toy Chest, as well as the founder and director of Whidbey Island Language, Art, and STEM Center. Welcome to the podcast, Hai Anh Vu.
Hi, Brendan. Thank you so much for having me on this program.
Yeah. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Hai Anh.
Yes, hi. So I'm a new resident of Whidbey Island. We came here 3 years ago from Hong Kong, and before that, my family lived in Hong Kong for over 8 years, and my own background is that I am from Hanoi, Vietnam, which is the capital city of Vietnam. And I've
Okay.
lived around many countries. I actually studied on the East Coast in a small liberal arts college called Bowdoin College. And so I was there for 4 years and then came back to Vietnam. And so met my husband, who is an American, actually from Edmonds. And so we traveled together for a while and raised our children in Hong Kong. And then our life ended up here now.
Wow. Very cool. So you guys have kind of been all over the globe.
Not really all over, but
Well,
yes,
yeah.
some countries. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
More all over than my living has been.
Yeah.
Very cool. So what was it like for you growing up in Vietnam?
Um, I mean, in hindsight, it's a very interesting time. I was born during the time right before Vietnam changed from centralized economy to market economy. And
Mm.
so it was over across the board. It was much a poorer time, but there was rapid changes. I mean, remember growing up, Russia was the language of choice, right, for students because Vietnam was a very good ally with the Soviet Union until the
Okay.
Soviet Union collapsed, and then everyone's like, okay, let's learn English, and so I was one of the, I guess, like the first generation that was privileged enough to get acquainted with the English as a second language in school. And during that time, Bill Clinton visited Vietnam and WTO opened up for Vietnam. So it was a very interesting time at that time. And then for me to keep continuing when after I grew up, by the time I'm 18, I moved to the US to study, and then coming back every year, you see the changes very rapidly in
Mm-hmm.
everything, in all aspects of life. And that continues until now when I come to visit every year to Vietnam. It's like, oh my God, you guys are so advanced now. Everything, internet and, payment and everything. It's just, things just change at a much faster pace because of how dynamic things are at the time and in the country at the moment, and a lot of things need to be established, and they're becoming much more and more the progress is much faster. So
Yeah, that's very cool. So when you were growing up there, um, was there something like, as far as your family's kind of like pushing you in a direction, was there any sort of like career or something you were interested in?
oh, that's interesting question. I think at that time, most people's aspirations for their children was to be able to get a job with the state sector, to work for the government
Mm-hmm.
because it promised security for life, right? And that's what people just think about. And so I actually majored in economics in college, which is quite
Okay.
popular among Asians coming to the US or anywhere outside their countries to study, because in our college at Bowdoin, there wasn't anything as a, like business major or accounting major. It's more like a liberal arts college. So economics is the closest to what you think of as a kind of a finance career.
Okay.
Yeah, but I also majored in French and minored in women's studies. And so for me, those are very interesting top subjects because there's more of anthropology and sociology and all things combined in there. But at that time, I was in the US by myself. So I made all those choices by myself and didn't have to consult my parents. Hey, I'm learning this, I'm learning this. And so I still finished with a economics degree, but I didn't use much of it in my career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then after you graduated, you said you moved back to Vietnam?
Yeah, so I worked in the US for a year on a student, it's called what's called OPT, a student
The
training
visa?
visa. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
it's on like the extended student visa, and then I moved back to Vietnam, and at that time I was very interested in journalism, so I joined a journalist news outlet, and
Hmm.
I ended up working in television for a while.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so it gave me a lot of skills in video editing, but also editing, content in general. And then I moved into public relations. So I was a public relations professional in an agency
Hmm.
for over 5 years. Uh,
Okay.
and as I said, the context of Vietnam is things were like gradually opening up. And at that time, which is over 10 years ago, there was a lot of new multinational companies coming in. And there were very few PR agencies. So ours are in high demand, and we ended up working with a lot of multinationals and Fortune 500 companies.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, they are all our clients. Yeah, so yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So then I did that for a while, and then I met my husband, and then we decided to move to Hong Kong because of his job, and so
Yep.
we followed his position to Hong Kong and decided that's a time for something new.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you guys meet in Vietnam?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
he actually was working for the United Nations, and that's how he started coming to Vietnam. And then after that, he also did a PhD in Vietnam studies,
Okay.
studying of Vietnam's economy. And so,
Very cool.
in many aspects, he know about Vietnam more than I do. Yes. So,
Nice.
yeah.
When as you kind of saw the shift in Vietnam from the you said the centralized kind of style to the market, were you seeing a increase in things like entrepreneurship and small businesses there?
Definitely, yes. And when I think about Vietnam in general, I think the people there are so entrepreneurial in their mindset, and it's not like you have to go to business school. It's like the woman selling things on the street, because
Yeah.
that's kind of like a survival skills. And so with the opening up of the economy, there were a lot of chances for people to do things like import, export, or even like translation for things similar to what we do in the public relations agency, which is trying to connect the Vietnamese public with an American or a British company who comes in Vietnam for the first time, and having to know a lot of the nuances of the culture and how to
Yeah.
do businesses there. And so we that was a startup business as well that I worked at in the public relations agency.
Hmm.
And so I think, yeah, I mean, I think it was people had more opportunities to explore entrepreneurial opportunities compared to before. But
Yeah.
people in Vietnam had always had that kind of survival skills, like what do we do now to make more money and provide for our families.
Yeah.
For example, my mom was working. She had a state job, a state. She was working for the post office.
Hmm.
However, in her side time, like after work and when we were born, she had to trade in candies, and that's like sell candies to
Okay.
wholesale. Yeah, but the small quantities, but try to gain from the differences between wholesale and retail, to make ends meet and to have savings. And so I think back of that, it's not like suddenly people become more entrepreneurial. My mom was entrepreneur by herself, even though she wouldn't call herself that glamorous title, right? And this is just an example of many people in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, what was it like for you guys once you guys moved to Hong Kong?
um, It is very different, of course. It's very exciting to be in another Asian country that is so dynamic. It was,
Hmm.
Hong Kong is the head office for a lot of Asia Pacific companies. It's
Okay.
considered like one of the hubs of Asia, of
Hmm.
Asia Pacific. So there's that kind of sense of being in the heart of the international community of Asia. But also, I really love exploring the local culture.
Hmm.
People speaks Cantonese there, and of course
Okay.
food and everything. For me, the equally interesting part is knowing the local culture and knowing the very special position of Hong Kong at the moment, and how it progressed until now with the tension with China and with the ownership of things and the struggle in the past few years. And so for me, it's an interesting part to observe. And I can't say we're part of it because we are still kind of like expats living in country because we don't speak
Yeah.
much Cantonese. So in a way, it's we're glad to be there, but in another way, it's like we still live in kind of like another bubble. Not
Yes.
really
Yeah.
like in the mainstream. We can't vote, we can't buy houses because we're foreigners there. So things are different. And so, yeah, I think there was a lot of that excitement. And I was very glad that my children were born there and was able to absorb some of that culture
Hmm.
and bring that with them. My younger one was only 3 when we moved here, but she
Okay.
remembers. Yeah, we just came back this summer, and they remember a lot of things.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, so it's part of them, and a lot of things I do with my quiet books are also inspired by that, by them because they have this kind of third culture identity, being born and raised in different places and having to
Yeah.
struggle that and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So, how did you guys eventually end up on Whidbey Island?
Everyone asks us that. I know. So my husband has some friends in Edmonds because he grew up in Edmonds. So the childhood friends are there, and they're very close together, very close as friends.
Hmm.
So one of them wanted to come and explore Whidbey Island for kind of like new farmer living on Whidbey. And
Hmm.
so he somehow convinced my husband to try out as well. And so we went to visit. And I like to tell people this story when we went to visit for the first time. And we drove at night, we drove around the highway. And, my husband would point to Langley and say, like, hey, that's a city. And I looked at it and it was all flat, right? And I was like, oh my God, this is called a city. You imagine we came from Hong Kong where it was like we're living with 100-story high-rise buildings surrounding us, right? And
Yeah.
the concrete jungle. And he's like, "That's a city." I'm like, "Oh my God!" But yeah, so it took me a while to get used to that. But I think we're grateful for that decision. We decided to move here. We decided to try out farming life. So we have a farm now,
Okay.
and I think I don't know if you know this book. The create about creative living by Liz. What's her name? Liz Gilbert, the woman who
Okay.
writes. Yeah, the woman who writes Eat, Pray, Love,
Okay.
and
Yep.
she has this book on creative living, and it
Okay.
says everyone should have something that the heart desires to do, to make, to create, and that shouldn't have to be something that earns you a living, but makes you fulfilled. And for her, it's writing. Whether she was successful or not, she was always writing. And for some other people, it could be creating something, dancing. And I think it's for my husband is farming. So so I think that he found something that he really loved to do, and I would like to be supportive of that.
Yeah. Very cool. So then, how did you come? Where did the idea start for Little Bean's Toy Chest? And for the listeners who don't know, can you describe the business a little bit as well?
Sure, yeah. So when my daughter was 2, she started playing with a lot of things, and always we were looking out for things to buy for her. And I quickly realized that in the Hong Kong market, even though Hong Kong is considered the capital of the toy market, because a lot of import export from China go through Hong Kong.
Hmm.
There was a lot of plastic toys. You go to the toy store or the toy street, surrounded by plastic. Or if not, there are only a few things, a few European brands at that time that was like super expensive, pieces of woods and things like that. And
Hmm.
so for me, at the same time, I saw that my daughter was very interested in felt, which is a material that is very easy to make a lot of things with.
Yeah.
And so my idea was to start making things with felt for her. And then eventually it became this concept of quiet book, which is not invented by my own. It's people have been doing it a lot of times. There are books that are made of felt or fabric, and that has a lot of activities in each page for children to play with.
Hmm.
And so usually they help the children to improve their fine motor skills, but also imagination, creative thinking, problem solving. If those are like math problems, for example, or puzzles. So in essence, anything can be made and can be created in terms of in like miniature version or game version with those toy books. And so Little Beans Toy Chest now specializes in quiet books, toy books that are promoting children to develop their skills while also keeping them off from screen, not
Yeah.
keeping them engaged for a long time away from the screen. The special thing about our brand is also that while many people focuses on only the five motor skills aspect, we focus on the content. So actually, we view ourselves more as a content creator because each
Okay.
book has a very definite theme and a specialized design that is not the same as anywhere else. So when I lived in Hong Kong, for example, one of our first books was called "I Love Hong Kong," which is a book that kind of documents a few landmarks and the foods and the cultures and the festivals of Hong Kong. And my idea
Hmm.
at that time was that I knew it was not our children's forever home. One day we would leave, and it's very common in Hong Kong for expats to come and go. So we want to
Hmm.
have something as like a keepsake for our children and
Yeah.
in a play form that they can play with. So we have things like the Star Ferry, which is like the Whidbey Ferry, like very iconic thing about Hong Kong, or the high-rise skyscrapers, and the food, the dim sum, the festivals like Chinese New Year and Mid Autumn festivals.
Yeah.
Those are all represented in the book as little games and little images for people to play with, and the children can relate that to their kind of what they see in the daily life. And so when we moved to the U.S., it became more of so in Hong Kong it was like it started as a way to express ideas and teach things for the kids. And so when we went to the US, I had taken on a new meaning for the business and for the books because um, we saw that at that time when we moved, especially 2020, and we live being on Whidbey Island is not very diverse, right? It's hard
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
find foods and people and cultures that remind us of Asia, Vietnam. And so for me to make other books in a series about Vietnam or other China or other countries is a way for us to celebrate our cultures as well. So now
Yep.
we have a little collection like the Asia theme collection um,
Okay.
that have different countries in Asia.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, in that, then, are your books? Do they also have writings and stuff within them, or are they more driven just by the pictures and the pieces that you're putting together?
No, they don't have words in them. And sometimes we put one or two words as a way for children to learn some vocabularies. So, for example, the book about Vietnam would have things like Tết, which means Lunar New Year. So
Okay.
one or two words, and so we're targeting children around age like say 2 to 5. So that's really pre literacy before they learn to read. So they can do some simple like pre-math games and then they learn the concepts. But the idea for us more is about imagination and creative storytelling.
Okay.
So you can read it, like quote, quote, read it in different ways depending on your family and what stories are relating to you. And another thing that's related to that is we used to make these books all with a very, very not like a homogeneous dolls that have like the same kind of peach color.
Hmm.
And after I talked to like coming to the US and talking to like being more exposed to the more diverse cultures here, I realized that, that's not enough. We need to represent.
Hey, it's Brandon jumping in real quick. We had some weird technical issues where Hyan's computer and internet died for a minute. So then we had to reconnect back into the podcast. So she's going to pick up with after I didn't actually ask the question on air, but we talked prior. But she's going to jump in with explaining why she started the Whidbey Island Language, Art, and STEM Center and kind of her heart behind that. So here's her answer to that.
Great. Yes, so I started the Would-Be Language Art and STEM Center because when I first moved from from Hong Kong to the US in 2020, one of my first questions to the real estate agent was, is there any, language programs on the island? My daughter was in Hong Kong and she was learning Vietnamese and she was learning Mandarin, and that's one of my worries when I moved to the island, was that where would that these opportunities be for her when she comes to the island, because it's much smaller and there's less offerings. And so that led me to become a volunteer for the Northwest Language and Culture Center, which is
Okay.
the only place in Whidbey Island that offer language training. Even though at that point, because of the pandemic, they had actually stopped a lot of the programs for languages. So I became friends with them anyway, and I helped them start the Spanish program for the next year
Yep.
when the pandemic kind of eased off a bit. And so we had continued to have some sporadic Spanish clubs and some summer camps in Spanish last summer, when the founder of the Northwest Language and Cultural Center actually passed away due to a very tragic and sudden accident.
Okay.
So that was quite a sad news for all of us, and also a disruption for the whole operation of the organization, because she had been the main person holding all these activities. And after she passed away, actually, the organization decided, all the board members and everyone decided to close that.
Okay.
So I saw that. It took me a while, but then I thought, there must be other ways to restart this program again. And so that's when I was inspired to start this center, at first as a language center.
Yep.
However, I've also been a parent here for 3 years, and I talk to a lot of parents around, and I find that actually people don't only want Spanish. The offerings on the island in terms of art and in terms of sports and dance in the south of the island are quite abundant. However, the offerings for like languages and STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and maths, and also art for children, are actually not a lot. So people actually want a lot more offerings for children, more programming, more things that children can do outside their school hours to pursue different interests and explore different things. And also, a bit more of after school care for the parents would be much appreciated. So that led me to expand the offering of the center to become languages, art, and STEM. And so that's what we're offering right now.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
cool. So, what are the things that you've done with the center this year?
So we started the center. I had a lot of motivation when we did the RAIN program together, which was a program to mentor and promote for small businesses on the island. And you know well, right, Brandon? You and I are
Yeah.
both mentors, but we are also benefited a lot from just being in that community and learning from the island county's economic development council about what supports there are for small businesses on the island. And
Yeah.
so actually I wanted to start I decided to start only this February, March,
Okay.
because it was also the time that we applied for a grant. There was a grant, the small business grant offered by the Economic Development Council,
Yep.
and I took the chance to apply for that as well. and it took two trials, but finally we also received a small grant from the that program. And so
Nice.
we started to promote for our summer programs in April, and we started the summer camps just at the end of last month in July. Until now it's about four weeks. So far, we've had 15 camps across the board, from Chinese, Spanish, coding, music, and art, with over 100 people or 100 families applying for their children to attend.
Very
And so
cool.
that was quite encouraging for us, because this is the very first year, and we also launched very late in the summer. But it really shows that the island is ready for more programming for children.
Yeah, very cool. All right. So you guys got done with the summer program. What do you guys have planned past that?
Yes, so our idea is actually becoming an after school center, after school enrichment center, where children can come to after the school hours, for different enrichment opportunities, from languages to art to music, and to science programs.
Hmm.
And so during the school year, we're planning a lot of activities for the after school program. We're going to have Spanish, and maybe a few Chinese, and maybe a couple more languages going, and also art programs, and also music and coding program, which is very popular. And
Wow.
I don't see anybody doing coding in on the island, so I believe we might be the first one, at least on the
Nice.
top of the island. So so we did two camps of coding in summer, and we continuing that during the school year as well. And actually, the coding program was enabled by the fund that we received from the Economic Development Council, because we got the grant to buy all the laptops so that the students can use for the coding program.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you.
How are you guys finding instructors and stuff for this?
Uh, Interesting. Yes, good question. It is a very small island, and as you can see, I'm very talkative. I talk to everybody, so it's been a lot of word of mouth. Finding people from other people. I also advertise on the local, advertising channels.
Yep.
But I also look out at schools and see if the teachers would like to teach more. And actually, I would love to find more uh, teachers. We're always looking for more teachers, because I feel that there are so many things that the community wants to be taught, to be offered, but there are not enough teachers yet. So we are trying to promote ourselves, and promote for the jobs that we want to recruit for. So most of these positions are actually contract based, or could be part time employee based. But the idea is that you contribute a couple hours a week or so to teach something that you're passionate about. Sometimes people are officially a teacher at school, and sometimes they're not. But you can always teach something, and we offer the administrative and marketing support, so that the teachers come in and they just focus on teaching, and they don't have to
Yeah.
worry about recruiting students or registration and things like that.
Awesome. That's really cool.
Thank you.
So where do you see this growing into then?
In this model of having a after school center is very popular in big cities, and that's what I see a lot in big cities like Hong Kong, right? Or even you see in Seattle, there'll be much more. And I'm hoping that our by starting this, we are going to be that for the people in the local community, to help them have like a centralized place to find different things for them to do. And it doesn't have to learn. It doesn't have to limit to South Woodby. It could be in North Woodby and Central Woodby as well. We're starting to talk to schools in other parts of Whidbey Island on partnership, and whether we can have our center kind of like a satellite class there, so that students over
Okay.
there can also go to our programs and learn different things. And the other thing that I see is that there are a lot of people who want to come to Whidbey Island on like summers or different breaks, and they want something for their children to do. So, for example, in summer we had these summer camps, and quite a few of the children come from the city, and some from Seattle, and some as far as New York, and they come in here to enjoy the time with the grandparents. But also, it's a time that they can enjoy some camps. So we're hoping that more people outside of Whidbey Island also see this as an opportunity to come and enjoy our beautiful island and also learn something new.
That's great. Well, that's
Yeah.
really cool that you guys are doing this program, because I think it's going to allow get more of these skills and stuff down to the kids in in an area that doesn't have a bunch of different schools like this.
No, yeah, definitely. And another thing I find is that there are so many talents on the island, and I think it's probably the same with Camano Island, where people want to come here because they want a more peaceful and grow on a farm and do farming and pursue different hobbies or live nearer to nature. But they have so many talents, and if you talk to people like, oh, can you do this? Can you do that? Some people can do filmmaking, some people can do a documentary or art or teach different skills, and that's what we aim to do as well, is connect all these talents together, so that the community can benefit from that. So I'm very excited about that as well.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Well, I'm really excited for both these ventures as you continue to move forward with them, and also continue to expand your guys' farm on Whidbey.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, lots of things, but we're very excited about living here and a lot of possibilities.
Yeah. All right. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most in the last 3 months?
It's a very hard question for me. So, during the pandemic, I realized that we haven't been purchasing anything apart from very basic things, right? Toilet papers and things you have to purchase.
Yep.
So, I'm not in the habit of spending a lot or purchasing a lot anymore. I would say of something very rather boring. I bought this book called Profit First, and I think you've heard about it from our
Yes.
program. And it actually was quite a surprising find for me to read the book. And I know it sounds very like money grabbing to say profit first, but the idea is quite groundbreaking for me, quite
Yeah.
new to me. So I find it as a good, like, wow, you need to read something new, or you need to expand your horizon to learn about all these things. So that was why I was excited about that.
Yeah. That's not a boring choice at all. I think that's such a great book, and especially for entrepreneurs who are just getting into it.
Hmm.
It's such an important kind of step in that journey, I believe.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Who is the most influential person outside of your family in your life?
Um, Again, I can't think of one particular person, but I would say my college, where I had my 4 years of liberal arts education, is a big factor, and when a big influence for me. And when I think about them, think about the college, think about the people I studied with, or I had the chance to know as teachers or alumni, and it just makes me feel like I want to live and work better, because all of us share this vision when we went to study there, to kind of contribute to the common goods and in all the things we do. And so I'd say that's a kind of common thing, is like people who are related to my college.
Yeah, very cool. All right, this is a fill in the blank question. I
Yeah.
know this is weird, but I've always wanted to blank.
Um, do you have time for a long story? A short story? There was this movie called Little Miss Sunshine. I don't know if
Yeah.
you watched that. Yeah, where the guy was talking about Proust being the author, the French author Marcel Proust. who was like confining himself for years in a place, and you think it's very boring, but he actually produced the masterpiece of his life by being confined and kind of trapped in a place. And
Yeah.
in a weird way, I feel like I need that because our lives are always so much like we're always moving and always like our attention is so fragmented that you don't get to sit down and do many things, very focused manner. So
Yeah.
that's the only thing I kind of fancy, even though it sounds like a torture. But I think it'll be cool to like sit down and read and write and be focused on that.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, and you're in the perfect spot for that.
Yeah, sit under the tree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who is an interesting or fascinating person that I should interview next?
Does it have to be an entrepreneur? No, right?
No, it can be anyone.
So we started working with partners in our new learning center as well. So not only teachers but also education partners.
Yep.
And I have been very impressed with Lauren Atkinson, who is the head of this new new learning collective called Heartfield. She actually used to be a founding member of the Gaelic School, which is a local school, like forest school that was
Okay.
founded before COVID. Um, so Lauren has a very interesting approach to education that is connected to learning about the earth and the surrounding environment around us and learning to cooperate and such. And so I think there's a lot of stories with Lauren and with her groups and her activities. I think that I would recommend you talk to her.
All right. Perfect. All right. And lastly, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Um, so many advice, but I think when I was young, there was a sense of fear a lot about missing out, like about trading and sacrificing. Like if I am to work too hard in this direction, then I lose out on that, or I will not have a lot of fulfilling career, no family life or friendship or things like that. And if I were to go back, I would tell my younger self that you can. It's not about it's about time management, right? It's not and focus management. It's not about like one or the other.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think held me back in terms of a lot of things. But it doesn't have to be so. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I know we had a few different technical issues, but I appreciate you pushing through all that.
Yes, and my apologies for the issues as well. And I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about my business and myself and share more with the local community.
Yeah, and connect Whidbey and Camano more and more. So,
Yes, definitely.
all right. Well, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Hai Anh Vu for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, you can go to caminocommons.com/podcast. Sorry, for a moment there, I definitely felt like I was like clicking into like airplane of like, thank you for joining us on this show today. So anyways, that's what you get because this is my first show back. So thank you guys for listening, and I will talk to you on the next one.